Hello, Ridgebacks, and welcome to the first episode of the second season of the OTSU talk show. Guys, I don't know about you all, but I'm super excited. How are you guys doing? Let me know. Let me know in the comments. How are you guys? I want to spill the tea. How are you guys? Good. Nice to hear that. Doing great. Awesome. Hey, someone knows my name. I feel nice. I'm good, sis. How are you? I'm doing well. Like I said, I'm super excited for today. First episode, second season. This season, guys, we are changing things up. New segments, new topics of interest, new guests. It's all about spreading awareness, getting to know different topics, being informative, and just having some fun. So, I'm just gonna wait until our first. Oh, our guest is already here. So I know you guys are excited to hear from our guest, the expert himself. So I'm just gonna let him in, and then we'll take it from there. 1 second. My brother, how are you?
Hello, I am good. How are you?
I'm doing blessed. Why don't you introduce yourself for all of us?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. So my name is Declan. I use he, they pronouns. I'm the Equity Inclusivity Advisor at Ontario Tech. So essentially, I help run some workshops and discussion groups and that kind of thing around equity, as well as support students who have experienced discrimination. So that's a little bit about me professionally anyways.
No, I love it. And just before we start and getting to our topic, I want to give a quick land acknowledgement because Declan, we know how important this is. So the university acknowledges the lands and people of the Mississaugas of the Scugog Island First Nation, which is covered under the Williams Treaties. We are situated on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas, a branch of the Greater Anishinaabe Nation, which includes Algonquin, Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. So today's segment, how to be an ally, specifically to the LGBTQ plus community. So brother, why don't you tell me, what does being an ally mean to you?
Ooh, I love that question. So I would say, an ally by its definition is someone who is not a part of a community that wants to support, fighting for the rights and, just in general be supportive of people of that identity. So I think one thing that's important to me in terms of allyship is it's about action. It's not really an identity. So me saying, I'm an ally doesn't really mean anything. It's more based on what I do, how we live, what we're actually doing. So I think to me, that's what an ally is. And an ally is kind of, a supporter, but not the main event. Allies are meant to kind of take a back seat and lift up the voices of the community that we're talking about. Maybe not take over space from that community. So I'd say that's what an ally means to me.
No, 100%. And something I'd like to add, which is my opinion, I feel like there's no in between. There's no spectrum of allyship. You either are an ally or you're not. I'm sorry, bud. You either are or you're not. And I know you agree with me. I know you agree with me on this one. So I know everyone wants to know the blueprint on how to be an ally. And I feel like one of the most important things is educating yourselves and knowing the facts. So why don't you enlighten us on how Pride even started from all the way from the start? How, when, why, who, and all of that.
Yeah, so I will just put a disclaimer that I'm not a historian, but I will try to share what I know about Pride. So just a heads up there. But essentially, the kind of most famous founding of Pride was the Stonewall riots. So this was in June of 1969 in New York. And the Stonewall Inn was a very famous queer bar type thing. So it was a gathering place for a lot of 2S LGBT plus people. And in the past and probably after that as well, there was constantly police raids and police were coming in and arresting people literally just for existing. And so basically on this night in 1969, there was another raid, but this one was a little bit different. The people started to fight back. And so it kind of turned into a riot. and, you know, people saying like, hey, this isn't okay, we won't tolerate this anymore. And then so 1 year later, on the date of that, you know, riot or protest or whatever you want to call it, there was, you know, essentially the first Pride started. And so there was a big march. It was actually all over the United States. I think like 3 different marches of people just being like, hey, we won't tolerate this anymore. You know, to us LGBT people exist, which shouldn't be illegal for us existing. We shouldn't be being arrested, this kind of thing. And then that just kind of spiraled into what Pride is now. It's a worldwide event. And I also want to acknowledge, we a lot of time talk about like, you know, American history, but like we had very similar histories here too. There was lots of, you know, bars and bathhouses being raided by police for, again, just to us LGBT plus people just existing. And that was, you know, before 1969 and for many years after. So I think that's also just important to acknowledge that it's not just an American thing. It also was happening here as well.
No, 100%. And then one thing I want to add is it was a Black trans woman, a queen, who started it at the same time. Like, to know that someone like that started it, and without them...
Oh my gosh, do you mind repeating that? My internet is cutting it.
Oh, sorry. I said it was a Black trans woman who started it, which is like even more amazing, I feel like. And it's more tough, I feel like, especially for them. And because of people like that who started this, we're able to have these conversations. Or else if this was back in the day, we would have probably gotten arrested for having these types of conversations. So definitely huge props to all of them. And
I think you bring up such... Oh, sorry.
No, keep going. You keep cutting off, so I didn't know when you start your sentences. But go ahead.
Sorry, my internet's a little wonky, so I like it's a fun time. So thanks for being patient. But anyways, yes, I'm glad you brought that up. I think it was a majority of like Black trans people who started these Pride movements and who, you know, like you said, gave us the rights that we have today. And those are the folks that aren't even necessarily benefiting off of a lot of those rights. So I think that's important to keep that in mind. And when we talk about, you know, to us LGBT rights, that means rights for everyone in that community. You know, that doesn't just mean like the white privileged folks. That means we need to be fighting for anti-racism, anti-ableism. Like all those things are kind of connected. We can't just isolate it and be like, no, we want to talk about like gender and sexuality. We really do have to be talking about lots of other, you know, identities and oppressions at the same time.
No, my brother's speaking facts. I love it. My brother's speaking facts. Oh, sorry. I just want to go through the comments. Just someone brought up a point. Yeah, it's the worst when some gays try and say that the T shouldn't be an LGBTQ. Why don't you explain that? I actually want to bring that up. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So the T stands for trans, and that's a big umbrella term for pretty much anyone whose gender isn't the same as the sex that they were assigned at birth. And trans people have been the foundation of to us LGBT plus movements and right movements from, you know, the beginning of time. And there are, I think it's, you know, kind of convenient for some people to be like, oh, well, let's just forget that now. And, you know, it's just about the LGB, because, you know, it's because of trans people that we even have our rights that we have now for, you know, LGB and all the other letters. So, yeah, I think there's kind of there's a bit of, you know, it's sometimes easier for folks because trans people do face a whole lot of oppression. So, you know, it might be like, well, you know, if I want to disassociate myself from that so I can kind of have my own rights and live my life. And that's not okay. We need to be fighting for, you know, everyone's rights.
Everyone.
Yeah, not just like the select few that are a little bit more palatable to the mainstream audience.
No, 100%. And speaking about educating ourselves, I feel like it's important to know terminology. And I want to be completely open with you. Oh, wait, are you frozen? Oh my God, you're frozen. I want to make sure you hear this. I'm gonna wait. Declan? Or is it just me? No, it's you, right? Wait, Declan, you froze. Is it me? Or like, could you hear me the whole time?
So my internet totally cut out and I missed the entire question.
Okay, I made sure not to say anything. Don't worry, I made sure not to say anything. But speaking on educating ourselves, no worries, it's all good. I'll always take like a little break when that happens, don't worry. But I feel like it's important to understand terminology. Growing up where I grew up, in high school, in elementary school, we didn't learn about anything, about sexual orientation, understanding the different terms. And it was actually thanks to you and student engagement and equity when I started to learn all this at Ontario Tech, which is, in my opinion, that's so sad that it took me until I was at the age of 18 to understand this stuff. So I have a few words that I'd love you to share with you what it means to you. It doesn't need to be from the dictionary or whatever, but what do these words mean? So first one is
Let's
queer.
do it.
What does queer mean?
Queer, oh my God, you started off with a hard one. So queer means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So it started out as a slur, so it's used as a negative thing towards a lot of 2S LGBT people, and then it has now been reclaimed by a lot of people in that community. So I mean, I identify as queer, I am like very much queer, but not everyone in the 2S LGBT plus community identifies with that word at all. You know, some folks still, you know, there's that pain associated with it. Some people just don't vibe with it. But often, you know, when we say like queer, you know, often you'll hear like queer and trans as kind of like an umbrella term for the entire 2S LGBT plus community. It can be, you know, a sexuality for some people. It can be a gender for some people. It's like my favorite word because it's so broad, and you can really do with it what you want. I will say it's one of those ones where you should use it if someone uses it for themselves. So, like, you can call me queer because I am, but if you don't hear someone else calling themselves that, then I would just, you know, either just use whatever words they use for themselves, because not everyone's comfy with it. So just be, I would just, yeah, be a little careful with that one, but it's a very fun word. I love it.
No, thank you for that explanation. Next, cisgender. What does that mean?
Yeah, cisgender. So cisgender basically means someone whose gender is the same that they were the sex that they were assigned at birth. So someone who, you know, they were born and the doctors were like, this is like a female baby, and they identify as a woman, that'd be a cisgender woman. So it's kind of the opposite of transgender, which would be someone whose gender is different than the sex that they were assigned at birth.
Got you. Gender binary. What does that mean?
So the gender binary is basically this false idea that there are only two genders, like man and woman. And so we will often talk about, you know, when we talk about the gender binary, we're kind of just talking about that, yeah, like that false assumption that there's like two options. You have man and woman and nothing else. And we know that's not the case. There are lots and lots of different genders out there between man and woman, completely outside of that. Some people don't have a gender at all. There's lots of different options for genders beyond those two.
Perfect. And then last word, I love this word, is gender fluid. What does that mean?
Oh, I love that word too. So gender fluid, again, means something different to each person, but generally it means the word fluid has like, there's a fluctuation. So it's someone whose gender is not always the same. It might fluctuate between one of two different genders, maybe one of 100 different genders. So, you know, it depends on the person, but essentially there's sometimes like there's a fluctuation. So, you know, one day or 1 hour, they may feel more like kind of like more akin or more like connected to one gender identity. And then, you know, at another time, it might be closer to a different one. So it's, yeah, if that makes sense.
Okay, no, I love that. I love that. Oh, someone actually has a question. Would you call gender a spectrum? If not, if no, then why not?
Love that question. So I would say personally no. And the reason is because I think the spectrum is a really great tool for folks to understand that gender isn't just, you know, man and woman, because, you know, it is a spectrum and use that a lot. But the problem is it's actually a little bit more complex than that, because a spectrum implies that we have, you know, man on one side, woman on one side, and then people who fall in the middle. But for a lot of people, that's not really how gender works. Like for myself, I'm non-binary and I don't really identify as like being in between a man or a woman. I'm just like kind of something else. Like I just don't really connect with that. And I know lots of other non-binary people feel the same. So I think it's a useful tool, but just when we constantly talk about spectrum, it kind of, you know, enforces that there's almost like, there's like one, the next, and then in between, when really there's like, oh, it's like a 3D cool shape. I don't know, a galaxy or something is what gender is.
No, exactly. No, thank you for enlightening us on that. Wait, okay, you're with us, you're with us. So we know our knowledge. I feel like that's super important. And now second that I want to bring up is not making assumptions. I really want to touch on that, the importance of pronouns and stuff like that. So why don't you go off a bit about that, about not making assumptions, and what are common assumptions that people tend to make, and call us out on it. Wait, did you hear what I said?
Yes, I love it. So I think we make, yeah, so assumptions. I hope that was the question, because that's what I'm going to yell a bit. No, just teasing. So I think we make a lot of assumptions. I think pronouns was a big one that you brought up. And sometimes we even do about sexuality too, right? Like we'll ask someone like, you know, do you have like a boyfriend? Or, you know, like, how is your mom and dad doing? When like, I've never met this person. I don't know if they have a mom and dad. Like, I have no idea what, you know, their parents look like or whatever. So I think we make a lot of assumptions. And I think that's something that we kind of need to like work on and start like pausing and thinking about before we jump to things. And I think pronouns is a huge one. So often, you know, we live in a world that, you know, assumes that based on how someone looks, you know, that's the pronouns that they're going to use. You know, someone who was assigned female at birth and like has long hair or something, like often we assume that they use, or that person uses she, her pronouns. And the problem is that's not always true. And it can be really harmful to assume the wrong pronoun for someone and then accidentally misgender them. So I think that's like one of the biggest things that people can do to start becoming an ally to us LGBT plus people, is to kind of like pause yourself before like think, you know, using pronouns for someone that you don't know. And, you know, think maybe, okay, should I, you know, like maybe let's just pause, wait, like let's wait to hear their pronouns or just use the name or whatever, but just kind of wait. We've also actually just released like 2 days ago a website on the Student Life page that has like a whole page on pronouns and some like tips and tricks and like here are some things that you can do and stuff.
Student Life is always on top of their game. I am not shocked.
It's perfect timing for this. So if you go to like ontariotechu.ca/equity and then you click on the resource tab, there's a page there on pronouns. So if you would like to learn more, you should definitely check that out. We also talk a lot about pronouns in our Rise Trans Identities workshop. So if you are interested, you can also check us out there, and I can talk to you forever. But if you have any questions about pronouns and things, also feel free to ask them now.
No, 100%. Someone actually has a question. They're like, sorry to ask this. First of all, do not apologize. Safe space. You can ask away. But can a man that classifies himself as a female use female bathrooms?
So I, like, in short, yes, but I also want to do a little bit of just like language teaching and correcting. So someone who identifies as female or a woman would just be a woman. So it doesn't really, you know, if they were assigned male at birth, that would be the terminology. So you would say, you know, someone who is assigned male is a woman can absolutely use whatever bathroom she wants. You know, if that's a woman's bathroom that makes her feel comfy, great. Feel comfortable in.
No, that's perfect answer. I love it. I love 100%. And then my another favorite one, I know this one's your favorite one because you're all about inclusivity, but language matters. I feel like the language you use in our everyday lives, and there's a habit that I used to have and I'm trying to get rid of it myself. So I'm calling myself out as well. Sometimes even the little things like saying, hey guys, that is something I try my best not to say, but it's like those little things about how language really matters. So what are your thoughts on that? What are common things that people say that we should stop saying maybe?
Yeah, I think that's huge. I think we will often, like, hey guys, things like that, which some people may think is fine, but you know, there could be folks who are like, I'm not a guy and I don't like when people say that when they talk to me, which is super valid. I think a really common one, like we already talked about, is just assuming people's pronouns, which we can, all work on. And I just want to like point out that like some of this work, like it's not easy, like it's not gonna, you can't just like turn a switch in your brain and suddenly just like, never assume people's pronouns ever again. But it's just about constantly trying and working hard. And if you make mistakes, just apologize and then try to get it right next time. We all make mistakes, but I think pronouns is a huge one. Things like guys, stuff like that, or like ladies talking to a group that you like assume are women. Like we don't necessarily know people's genders. We can just say folks, friends, pals, people, whatever you want.
One of my favorite ones, family.
Love it.
Family. Yeah.
I love it. One other one that I'm really passionate about, and this is like particularly pertinent for anyone who's in like healthcare, like health science type thing, but also just anyone, is like degendering body parts. So instead of saying, instead of saying something like feminine hygiene products, because those aren't necessarily a feminine thing. Like we can say menstrual products, or instead of saying like men's health, what are we talking? Are we talking about prostates? Then we can just say prostate health. Are we talking about, I don't know. I think it's just being a little bit more specific with what we're talking about instead of kind of generalizing and saying men or women have this. No, in this situation, we're talking about people with uteruses, or we're talking about people with prostates, or what have you, because not everyone who has a prostate is going to be a man, and not every man has a prostate for that reason. You know what I mean? So it just helps to be a little bit more specific
100%.
with our language.
No, I loved how you brought up the health, because I'm going to be honest, I never thought it that way, and I'm in health sciences, so I love, like, you literally just educated me on something about using language. So thank you. I love that. I love that. And I feel like another thing, this one's pretty common sense, and I'm not going to use actual terminology because it's like not good words, but like we have to be careful on using certain slurs. Like I'm not going to say them, but just be like, hey, that's so whatever, or like those, you guys know what it is, making sure you don't say those slurs because they come off as offensive and they're hurtful. And there's history behind those slurs as well, which is important to understand. So,
Yeah. Totally. I think that's so important. You know, a lot of people will say, well, I didn't mean it like that.
it doesn't matter.
Then don't say it.
Don't say
right?
it.
If that's
Don't
not how you
not
meant
say
it,
it. If
then
you
don't
don't know,
say it.
especially like, I feel like once people really need to do their research before saying a word, because the history behind a certain word about like back in the day of how people who identified as that group, like the stuff that they've been through, and like you're using that in your everyday language in an inappropriate way. Like, so do your research. It's all research, and don't say something you don't know if you don't know what it means to. Like, a lot of us have a tendency, like we hop on trend just because all our friends call certain people a word. We might start saying it. Don't do that. Do your research, know what it means, and just be respectful.
Love it.
Yo, we're
love
snapping at each other, spitting facts, all facts. And last question. I feel like this is the most important. What can people with privilege do to support?
Oh, I love this question. Okay, so I have a couple ideas. I also encourage folks, if you have ideas that you're watching, share them in the chat and we can maybe read them out, because I don't have all of the ideas. I only have a few. So I think language we talked about, I would definitely start working on, you know, sharing your own pronouns when you can and not assuming others. So, you know, every time I introduce myself, I try to say, hey, I'm Declan, I use he or they pronouns, just to help normalize this idea that we don't know someone's pronouns just by looking at them. And it also just makes it a way safer space for trans and non-binary people to do that. I know, you know, I'm much more confident just doing that in any space now, but there was a time where like I would only feel comfortable saying my pronouns if like someone else did. And when they did, it made such a big difference for me, because, you know, now I'm less likely to be misgendered in that space, and that's awesome. So I would say, you know, work on pronouns, share your own, try not to assume other people's, try to start degendering body parts, and yeah, language matters.
100%. I actually have two questions. Oh, wait, sorry. Are you not done yet? Sorry, finish.
No. Go.
Okay. There's actually one anonymous question we got. I'm sorry. It was sent 5 minutes ago, so I'm not too late. But their question is how to not confuse how to not confuse the pronouns they, them with the group they, them. I think that's the question. Like, can you answer that?
Yeah, I think context is important. So I think once you get more, I think you might get confused the first couple times that you're using it or someone else is using it and you're like, what, a group? But as you start to get more and more familiar, you will just kind of pick it up intuitively. So if I'm saying, you know, I was hanging out with my friend and they said this, well, because I said my friend singular, you know, you can kind of interpret that it was only one person. So I think
that's smart.
You'll get more and more familiar with it as you go, but you may be a little bit confused at first. And that's totally fine. Just muddle through it, try your best, ask questions. You could say, sorry, is this one person or a group of people? You can ask, that's totally fine.
No, 100%.
So, yeah.
And another thing I wanted to say for people with privilege, I just want to quickly talk about how you don't support quickly, just because I feel like people get confused between actually being an ally and being a fake or public ally. One of my friends, actually, it was, we had a conversation last time and she said this perfect word. I forgot what it was. I think it's called like public allyship, where just attending the Pride Parade does not make you an ally and supporter. Just doing that, or just putting up the colors all over your room or decorating with all these rainbows, that alone doesn't make you an ally. I feel like that's my opinion. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I've heard the term like performative allyship, maybe, if that's your kind of
I think that's the word. I said it wrong. Yeah, performative allyship. Yeah.
Close enough. We all knew what you were talking about. But yeah, I think if your allyship is only 1 month a year, I think that's a red flag, and that, you know, probably you're not really being an ally. If it's, you know, if your kind of underlying like reason that you're doing it is for, you know, social clout type thing, probably that's not an ally. So I think it just, as long as it's coming from a genuine
do that
place,
a lot. Businesses do that a lot. And I know you know this, fam. I know you know this.
100%. Rainbow capitalism is huge. People love to slap a rainbow on something. I think that's also something that you could do to be an ally is, you know, not buy things from like, you know, random big businesses that have rainbows on things that are, you know, just trying to make money, and maybe buy from like a specific to us LGBT plus creator instead. That's a cool thing that you can do. I also just wanted to answer the question here. So someone said, like, how do you find privilege in this sense? Yeah. So in this situation, we're basically talking about someone who is not a part of the 2S LGBT plus communities. That's what we mean by privilege. So then that person might benefit from cisgender privilege and or heterosexual privilege is essentially what we mean by that.
No, 100. I totally agree with you. And like you said before, the whole intersectionality, like I always like when you're talking about race and all of that too, like making sure like not like, I want to be like I said, I don't identify as being part of this community, so I'm not going to say too much about it. But I feel like even within the community, a person of color is even part of it, like you're just less privileged. So like, what are your, say some stuff about that?
Yeah, so I think that's huge, and I think intersectionality needs to be part of everyone's allyship, and I think that's a really good point too, where it's like folks need to be doing some more work to be supportive of the 2S LGBT community, but we also need to be doing some internal work to be more supportive of ourselves and
Exactly.
stuff like that, because racism is everywhere, and that includes the 2S LGBT plus community. Ableism or discrimination about folks with disabilities is everywhere, including in our community. So I think there's work that we need to do to kind of benefit to stop benefiting from those oppressions. And one thing I also wanted to point out is that this month is also Indigenous History Month. And I think it's kind of wonderful to me that they're together, because I think it's a great opportunity for us to kind of combine these concepts. And I think that to us LGBT plus, like liberation and rights, needs to come hand in hand with decolonization. Just because in general it's important, but also because in a lot of Indigenous communities for thousands of years, Two-Spirit and 2S LGBT plus people were like celebrated, and there wasn't as much discrimination as there is now. And I think we have a lot to learn from that way of thinking. And I think we have a lot to do to kind of dismantle that colonization. So I think, colonization and the oppression of 2S LGBT plus people go hand in hand. So if we're going to fight one, we have to fight the other as well.
I love it. I feel like lesson of the day, what you said, what really resonated with me is doing that internal work. We all need to work on ourselves. We need to educate ourselves. We need to have more of an open mind and see the world from a different perspectives, like different perspectives. There's so many out there. And just knowing that there's so much around you, that your perspective isn't just it. What your life isn't everyone else's life. I feel like people really need to get that straight. Like, it's not everyone's.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we do definitely have like a tendency as humans to like assume that our perspective is everyone else's, but that's not the case. So we need to be learning actively and growing as people. And I think Pride Month is a great excuse to do that and start that, and then, continue that throughout the year.
I love how you said continuation, just because I want to tell everyone, this is just one segment. I really hope you guys heard what I said at the beginning. This is a segment, which means we are continuing the conversation throughout the year, whether it's about pride, whether it's about Black Lives Matter, whether it's about Indigenous people, colorism, sexism, all of it. It doesn't stop with just this episode. It's going to keep continuing. Like I said, we have so many segments coming out. I'm telling you guys this right now, and we're going to get students, staff from the OTSU, people from Ontario Tech, everyone. I just want everyone to really know that. You just seem so happy.
Yes, I'm so happy. I'm really stoked that you're going to be hosting this, Amrutha, and just keeping these conversations going. I think that is so amazing and so important. Do you mind if I plug a couple events happening throughout Pride Month?
Please. I was literally about to ask you about resources and events and everything.
Perfect. We are on the same wavelength here. Awesome. So we have quite a bit of stuff going on for Pride Month, but also just throughout the year. So we have our RISE workshops, which stands for Respecting Individuals, Supporting Equity. And essentially, these are workshops on a range of different topics. So one of them is on trans identities. One of them is on sexual orientation. We also have ones on anti-racism, anti-ableism, health equity, First Peoples, lots of other ones that I'm also missing. But that's a great opportunity to learn more. What else do we got? We have our equity talks sessions and our other discussion groups, such as the non-other Black life discussion groups that are happening throughout this summer. We have one coming up in a couple weeks on asexual and aromantic identities. So if that's something that you are like, ooh, I don't know a ton, that might be a cool thing to attend. Yes.
I love that one. I love that.
I will see you there then, Amrutha. We have our Let's Talk Sex workshops happening throughout the summer, and we have one specifically, I want to say next week, talking about HIV and the 2S LGBT plus community and kind of the connection there and the history there. And we also have tons of resources online. So if you go to ontariotech.ca/equity, and then you click on that resources kind of tab, there's a whole bunch of different resources in our equity resource library that you can check out on 2S LGBT plus identities, but like on a whole range of other topics too. So that's a really great resource hub if you're looking to learn more.
That was a lot. I love it. We love you. And I just want to say to everyone, OT Student Life and the OTSU, we're always here for you. If you ever want to talk, if you ever want to reach out, please know we're all here for you. So that's super important. And like I said, we all stand for this. We stand for equity, equality, diversity, inclusivity. So you guys heard it right here. And like I said, the conversation will continue. It doesn't just stop with Pride Month. It continues. Well, I guess, guys, no, I just said it. See, I said, guys, it's a habit. I'm working on myself, everyone. Well, that's all, folks. That wraps up our live. I really hope to see you all at our next one. Fam, I love you so much. Thank you for coming out. We appreciate your time and energy.
Yes, thank you so much for having me and for hosting these sessions. I'm super stoked to see what you have in store next. This is going to be awesome.
No, 100%. Sending love and positivity, everyone. Hope to see you all at our next live. Peace out.
Awesome. Take care.